faculty and staff from William James please stand and make sure that you get a chance to greet these people and talk with these people while they're here today. We're honored to have you with us. Nick and I have talked for a long time, but you folks are the core of the connection that needs to be made between the two campuses, so thank you for spending some time with us today. I also want to recognize Dr. Samuels in the back, because he'll probably be horrified that I'm doing this. But when I started as president, I talked a lot about the fact that we needed to do career-connected learning. We needed to really focus on experiential learning. And we had to find partnerships with institutions who believed in those pathways for our students passionately and understood that our students needed to work and go to school at the same time, that workforce development is such a critical part of what we do in community colleges. So in that conversation, Dr. Samuels, who's CEO from the Education Alliance, made the original connection for Dr. Covino and I, and I'm very grateful for that. Dr. Samuels, thank you, and I'm so delighted you could be with us today. So William James College is an extraordinary place that I knew nothing about. And I think that may be true for many, many people who live in Massachusetts. An incredible jewel of work in psychology that really trains individuals to be practitioners and does so in a way that's focused on experiential learning and really meeting the needs of the workforce in Massachusetts. And that's something we've had lots of conversation about. But it's an institution that is 100% focused on psychology, behavioral health, and leadership. And if there's any time in our history, if there's any time in this country's history, but if there's any time in our history, and certainly in the history of this institution, there's nothing more important than our conversation about our mental health, students' mental health, their well-being, and how we develop leaders in critical fields to be able to meet the needs that we can't currently meet today. We have a Human Services program here, we have a psychology program here, and we have a significant number of liberal arts students. The agreement that we're going to talk about and sign today is really all about providing an access point and a trajectory for those students into fields in behavioral health that can make a difference for our students, that will diversify those fields because of the students that we serve, and at the same time will provide them with an exceptional education. Not only that, when we look at the mission of William James College and we see the leadership that's being provided there by Dr. Covino, we understand that it's this combination of experiential learning, social responsibility, and personal growth that's at the hallmark of what William James does. So, missions completely aligned between a community college and a small private institution that can make a difference for our students. So I'm excited that we're here to talk about that today, and you'll hear more about the program and the possibilities that you all need to be aware of as we interact with students. But when I went with Dr. Covino, we meet here and I had an opportunity to show him the Bedford campus. We talked about the fact that this is an open campus for all and the possibilities for William James to have a presence on this campus, for courses to be taught here, to really make sure that that bridge between our programs and their programs match, and that potentially even we could talk about partnerships to be able to do the kinds of social responsibility work that's so important today to make sure that we can help our K-12 partners, our nonprofit partners, and all of the folks that are dealing with the same mental health issues that we are dealing with today in our classrooms and in our lives. And a lot of that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. So I was saying to Nick earlier, this is the first time that we've had a gathering like this in this room in a very long time. So I'm delighted that you're all here. I'm delighted that I can see most of you if I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm delighted to have our colleagues here from William James. But more importantly, I just want to introduce for a moment before Nick begins his speech and I tell you a little bit more about Nick. We have one of our own that is now at William James, and we're so proud of her. So before I tell you anything more about what's possible with a William James education, it seems more important that we turn to one of our own students to do that. So I introduced Jennifer Burns, who in 2008 received her psychology concentration AS. She is now at William James in organizational leadership, psychology with a neuroscience concentration. And I'd love you, Jennifer, to tell us about your experience at William James and why you chose them.
Thank you. afternoon, everyone. It's a blessing to be standing here today amongst colleagues, but also this is where my foundation happened. I came back to school at Middlesex Community College as a non-traditional student. I'm also an alum of the TRIO program. So what that means for those of you who don't know is low income and first generational students. Academia was not something that was nurtured in my family of upbringing. Just to be real transparent, I come from a home that wasn't desirable for people to grow up in. And I ran away at 12, right? So like that's just a snapshot of who Jennifer Burns is. So I came in here, I was living in a domestic violence shelter with my children, and I came in here, I was introduced to the TRIO program, I was introduced to academia at Middlesex Community College, and what that did for me, Bob Farron, he's not in this room right now, but he's a strong person that really helped me along this trajectory of what I'm going to do, because I didn't grow up, I have an 8th grade education. Well, I'll have a doctoral degree in a couple of years. With an 8th grade education, and the love and support and community that I received here at Middlesex Community College is the same love and support and community that I received at William James College. And I give you that comparison because from here I went on to UMass Lowell, where I received my bachelor's and master's degree program, and I got lost in the system of the larger university. So I finished my graduate studies in 2012, and I'm sorry, 2014, and I took a couple of years off, and I started to do some research because I did want to go all the way, right? So I wanted to break glass ceilings, break the status quo, you know, do that. That's who I wanted to be. So I knew I was going to go for my doctoral degree. And at the time, I was working for the Methuen Police Department. I was fundamental in creating an intervention that responded to overdoses in the community. It's the CARES initiative. It is still active and running. I'm just not a part of that anymore. I'm actually consulting for Lawrence Police Department on an equity and for public safety grant that they received. So I'm an external consultant, consulting to the police department in Lawrence for mental health and substance use and individuals in transition, which means homelessness. And when I was working at the police department, I started to look around, and I knew I couldn't go to an institution where I would have to show up on campus. I knew I needed something that would work with my lifestyle. I knew I needed something that I would be able to accomplish, and I knew I needed something small. I knew I needed the community that I receive at William James College because of who I am as a student. And it's not that I'm a needy student, I just need to feel like I belong to something as a student. I don't do well when I'm out on the outskirts. I have to kind of be involved in the middle doing that work, and that's what I found at William James. I went on my interview. That went fairly well. I went to orientation on campus, and that went phenomenal. I got to meet my cohort. And through my work at William James, I've had you talked about it, President, about the experimental learning, and that is something that is most valuable to me because I'm the type of person, immerse me into the culture, and I'm going to pick up the skills automatically. Give me a book to read, and I'm going to be able to read it and get the material, but I have to read it 5 or 6 times to get the material, but put me, a day leaving an environment, I'm going to know exactly what skill set I need to have to be able to do the work I need to do in an ethical manner in an organization. So with that being said, I have found everything I possibly wanted in my whole educational experience from both of these. So whenever I found out, Anne's like, "Are you going?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Check your email." I'm like, "Okay, but I'm not teaching this semester. I haven't been checking emails." And she's like, "Okay, just check your emails." And so I saw that. Right? We don't check emails if we don't have to, right? So I saw the invitation, and I have Middlesex, this, even though I'm not teaching, I'm involved in the faculty academy. I just finished with Darcy, the the healing and learning and racial healing circles. I just finished that training. I'm going to be doing another training with Jen and Gordon about how to make sure that we create syllabuses that are that have inclusion and equitable approaches to all students. And that's the big piece to this whole puzzle that I appreciate and I admire about both institutions, is because you value the students regardless of who they are, regardless of what they look like, regardless of where they come from. And that's the blessing that allows me to be standing here today, almost Dr. Burns. Thank you.
So the best part of that is that Jennifer found out 5 minutes ago that I was going to ask you. No more. So that would teach you two things. Be careful about showing up to an event. Jennifer, thank you. I mean, there's no better testimony than that for the tremendous work that's done at both institutions. So awesome. I'm sorry I keep calling him Nick, because I tend to be a more folksy kind of guy, but certainly Dr. Nicholas Covino, who is the second president at William James College, comes with us after a very distinguished career. He started his work, and he was actually the director of psychology and the director of training in the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. Nick is a psychoanalyst, a member of the Boston Psychoanalytic Society and Institute, a former faculty member at Harvard Medical School, and under his leadership, everything really became more focused at William James, has grown from a single degree institution to one with 4 academic departments, but most importantly, specialty training in military, global, forensic, and leadership psychology, in addition to the consultative services that William James offers to schools, courts, and business. And I couldn't be prouder. I have heard this presentation or some version of it when we were presenting at NETCHI this December. I'm really delighted. Nick has just had some knee surgery. He's recuperating and doing really well. But in case you see him sit down at some point, he can only stand for so long at this point in his recovery. But I'm really thrilled that he'd come and spend some time with us this afternoon. And without any further ado, Dr. Nick, please.
You'll also have to pardon the sneaker. So Joanne said this morning, our vice president for enrollment, I was going to physical therapy. So I was dressed like a coach and I had my sweatpants on and stuff to go to physical therapy. And she doesn't know me that well yet. And she came over to my admin person, Lily, and she said, is he really gonna like dress like that for this thing? So Lily said, no, probably not. But I do have my cool Fred Rogers shoes that I can wear. So what'd you say? Love, compassion, community. Yes? Huh? So Paulo Freire, people know Paulo Freire, educational philosopher, a big critic of what we do, said education. People keep treating it like a bank, right? You come, you sit, you make a withdrawal, you leave in some way. What's the root of education, right? So 2 Latin words, educo, right? To lead from. So the work that we do is not to provide to, right? Or to impose on or upon somebody. It's to lead from, to bring out the greatness that exists in a person who could come from any place, right? Any place, from anywhere. Bringing those talents, that compassion, that ability to support and love and form community with anybody in a space, and bring them to the fullness of who they are, right? I'm honored to be with you folks. That's who you are, right? So I give this talk, or a version of this talk, to people at elite schools. It's all brand new to them. I know this is not brand new to you. Any one of you could do the same kind of talk that I'm gonna offer to you at the moment, right? Because this is what community college does. You guys love your folks. You guys form community with your folks, and you guys find the brilliance that exists in that student that they doubt greatly, right? Even afterwards, even when you get your doctorate, there's a little imposter syndrome kind of thing that comes for many of us in that space. But you lead them to a place where they can be strong in that, because you believe that. You believe that that is really what education is, right? So here's here's the choir, right, that we'll talk a little bit about. So I'll give you some ideas to share a bit, and we can kind of think about them together. We did mental health on campus till about 2000 in a very traditional way. So most of us in the room came to a higher education institution. You had a college mental health center. If you wanted to sit and talk to somebody, maybe it was 8 sessions, or maybe it was group work, but by and large, you took a number, you found somebody, you sat and you talked. That's what the college mental health center did. They then became interested in preventive mental health, so you might see a course on managing stress, you might see a course, but that's what they did. They did it very well for a long time. We can't do it that way anymore, for a couple of reasons. We can't do it that way anymore. So we have to rethink what I'll call a clinical model of service delivery in that space, where we're only treating the people largely that have a diagnosable mental illness, which at the time that I went through school, in fact, prior to the pandemic, was about 18% of the population. It's 45% of the population now has a diagnosable mental illness. 45% of the population. It's like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, right there. It's like half the room has a diagnosable mental health problem. That means another 10% of us have difficulty with managing our mood, going to sleep at night, finding ways to manage our food intake, managing our emotions, our relationships with each other. So it's more than half of the people. You can't treat more than half of the people in a little tiny room. You can't do that. We can't do that in that space. So it's impractical to do this. It probably was wrong in the first place to do it. We'll see about that in a second. So the good news and the bad news is we're forced to change, but we're going to change, hopefully, in the right direction. So my argument would be that we need to uncouple what we had assigned to the College Mental Health Center and think about services that our folks need, ways that we as teachers, as educators, may need to change, resources that need to be developed in the campus community, because we've got to treat this like a public health problem. It's too big to treat clinically now, first of all. And secondly, it really is a public health problem, right? It really is affecting everybody. If I asked you to raise your hand, who in the room has somebody really close to them that has a diagnosable substance abuse issue or mental health, right? We'd all raise our hands. We'd all raise our hands. It's happening in everybody's family, all of our families, right? It's a big problem that our society is embracing or failing to embrace, right? So, you know, the primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention, right? So you want to think in a public health model, what can we offer the group that's efficient, effective, applied to as many people as we can make it be, and to get as many people benefited as we can get on a first wave, right? So what kinds of things can we do in that space? I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Secondary prevention, how can we organize ourselves to treat the folks that have the early signs or the easy to treat signs of a problem? So for example, how do we create CBT programs for 6 weeks so that people can learn how to manage their emotions and deal with depression? A lot of folks are going to benefit from that, and you don't need to do it individually for a 50-minute hour with somebody. It's more educative than it is therapeutic, and yet it's therapeutic, right? Can we think about insomnia the same way? Can we think about eating the same way, right? There's a lot of problems that young people have that we could think about packaging something in a way that might even be asynchronous and delivering that as a secondary prevention. Well, we don't do that now. We don't do that now, right? And then reserve the top for a complicated type of program where we would treat the people that have the most serious illnesses and we give them the intensive care that they need. However, I'm going to say to the president and to your senior leadership, you probably don't, because I don't know any place that does, have a policy about what your mental health center does. And if you do, you're ahead of the pack. The fact that most universities and colleges do not, Harvard doesn't have that, MIT doesn't have that, no place big that does this work has that. So how many people in here are in the College Mental Health Center or work in that? All faculty, one person, right? So you, unfortunately, have a target on your back wherever you are. Your colleagues, a target on your back. Every mom, every dad with a kid expects that everything that their kid needs gets done by you. Isn't that a little daunting, right, to wake up to in the morning, right? We're burning out our staff because we haven't set a policy up that says to people that just like the infirmary can't take care of cancer, God bless us, but can't take care of cancer. So your kid gets cancer here, we'll get her to the hospital, we'll set them up as well as we can because we're the local authority about where it's good. But don't expect chemotherapy in our infirmary, right? Don't expect knee replacement, PT, in our infirmary, right? You gotta go someplace else if you're gonna do that stuff, right? We don't do that with mental health. We expect our folks 24/7 to be managing emergencies, to be managing the first outbreak of psychosis, and put that plan in motion for folks. We expect them to be referees for roommate problems. We expect them to be dealing with people about career issues. Anything that comes in the area of personal growth and development winds up being there. There's like a sign with an arrow that says, go to the counseling center. That's unsustainable, right? When I was young, the primary peach job you could get would be in college mental health. What an awesome thing to do. Wicked smart kids, right, that you talk to. A summer off, right, or largely off. You could do long-term psychotherapy, you could do brief treatment, you could do this, you could do that. Peach job, right? 7 open jobs at Boston College. Now, can't fill them. 7 open jobs at MIT. Can't fill them. MIT, Boston College, BU, big spaces, nice amenities, well-resourced. Can't get people to go to work in those spaces because the job sucks. Big surprise, right? The job sucks. It's just overwhelming to people. So we need to really rethink. We need to really rethink how we're going to help this doctor do better in her space, right? We're going to have to take that on because the demand is there, right? And so how might we do that? How might we think about that? Okay, good frame of where we might go. All right. Now I'm going to go forward. We couldn't go backwards. Now we're going to go forward. You good? There we go. All right, you going to do this with me? All right. Love this partnership thing. Don't you hate it? You go to next slide, please. Next slide. I'll try to do that. Second important point. We don't just do education, right? So here's a picture of a 17-year-old and a 22-year-old, same kid, right? I couldn't find one. I got to find one because I got to go do the board of trustees at Mount Holyoke next week. I got to find a female that's like this. If you got one, send me one. If you got one at home, send me the 17-year-old and the 22-year-old. That would be good. We'll grab them together. I'm not going to take her with me. No. I'll swap you my 17-year-old. I'll give you him. All right. So what do we see, right? What happens in front of us, around us, within us as we meet the young people? Every young person that we come has psychological, psychosocial issues that they are grappling with that are giant, right? They're not here to learn physics. That's not what happens in 4 years. Just. I mean, it does happen, and you kind of have to learn physics. I don't want to be anti-academic. But this is a time when you're going to learn about who are you as a professional person. Not where you've been, what you learned, what you struggled with, but what's your possibility? Where are your values? What would you like to be? An 18-year-old, so someone's Thomas, if there was a person with that, right? The first love affair that they're going to have, the first episode of drinking and folks that are doing too many drugs and drinking, the first likely experience of multiculturalism for people, all the stuff that people need to think about. Where are my values? Where do I belong? Where do I stand? What do I say yes to? What do I say no to? All that stuff happens in front of us. There's no curriculum for that. There's no curriculum for that. So one of the ways we can help this doctor, right? Think about the course that you teach. Think about these adolescent struggles, young adult struggles. When we were very serious about diversity, we put it into our syllabus. And we put the vice president for academic affairs in charge of looking at those syllabi, and the DEI person in charge of looking at the readings that we had, the exercises that we had, to make sure that that important issue got attention. We're a long way away from getting that done, but we did that. We don't do that with psychology. We don't. So maybe we read Catcher in the Rye, right? Or maybe not, right? But we're not thinking about substance use disorder. What's a drinking life like? right? So could we assign that book and think with people about what a drinking life is like? What's a drug life like? What's it like when you fall in love and you lose your love, right? How do people manage that kind of grief and that kind of loss when a parent dies? How do you find yourself in a space where you stand up for something in that? You could do that with biology, right? It lends itself to philosophy, lends itself to English, lends itself to psych, lends itself to humanities. But if we all took a look at what we taught from a lens that said the folks in front of us are growing, and they're growing up and they're growing through, how might we find a way to give them academic exercises to be able to embrace that growth and to learn from that growth? Can we find a way to incorporate the other things we'd like to teach about what's a narrative, or how do we find this composition? Can we put that content in like we did with diversity? We must, right? We must. Again, 50% probably better of our folks, every other person, struggling with stuff at a very high level of struggle. What's happened since COVID? Did that go on me or did that go on you?
It's a very sensitive clicker.
It's very sensitive. Love sensitivity. All right? You guys know this stuff. Last several years, we've seen a rush of anxiety and depression. When COVID started, the Kaiser folks, the APA folks, looked at this month to month to month to month. The numbers rose from 18% to 25% to 30% to 35% to 45%. It's probably higher than that now as we've done it. Pick the place, pick the person, pick the place, pick the time, right? We are all experiencing this. This is us. Excuse me now. We'll go back still. But where's it big? Among our group of folks, right? 18 to 25, 18 to 27. Young people experience this worse than anybody. I have a little 17-year-old. Every one of his friends has a depression, every single one. And these kids are handsome, they're articulate, they play sports, they play 2 sports, they play 3 sports, they've got girlfriends, they've got boyfriends, and they're still wicked depressed, right? So we're gonna find whether this was something in COVID that poisoned our kids and affected them physiologically, and we've not discovered that yet, or whether this was just social isolation and a mask, and it's been just too difficult to have any kind of fun or any kind of social connectivity with people. But these kids experience it worse than anybody else. These are our people, right, as we do. Then, with our comments, open. Go forward. Oh. We may let you do it. So go forward, with the next, all right? And what this has done is it's caused a run on mental health centers and colleges, right? So we had seen rates 10%, 15%, 20%, 35% now of folks that go to college want to get something from the college mental health center. Interestingly, studies find that they don't stay for prolonged periods of time, right? So they may stay 3 visits, 4 visits, but the urgency about that is high, right? They want this. And we're dealing with the Generation Z guys. They tell you what they want, right? And they'll get what they want, right? But they don't want psychoanalysis. And they don't want long-term psychotherapy. They don't tend to stay more than 2 or 3 visits when they come, but they come and they knock on the door, right? Again, arguing for, could we be many things as we deliver services, not just one. Okay? I'm gonna drop this, because why would I even hold it? Okay, thank you. When we ask kids what they're troubled by, and this is another issue of importance. You guys do better with this than most. I gave a talk to the board of trustees at WPI in the wake of the 7th suicide that they had in that space. And I said to them, you know what kids worry about? Young people are worried about? What are they worried about? They're not worried about drinking, they're not worried about their girlfriends, they're not worried about their boyfriends, they're not worried about, what are they worried about? Doing well in school. It's the first thing that they're worried about. Second thing they're worried about, someone's paying for me to do well in school. How's that gonna happen in that space? So even if mom is there writing the checks, and right there with them, right? They're still worried about mom writing the checks, right? So what have we created, I say to them, to you, they have 4 quadrants in the year where they have high stakes exams at the end of the year, at the end of the quarter, right? What are we doing? Right? What are we doing? We're inviting these people into our space to educo, right? To educate them in that space. We're inviting them into our accepting, loving community and torturing the bejesus out of them, right? And saying to them, you know what? You don't get it. How could you possibly be an engineer and not master this group? So who teaches neurology or neuropsych, right? How much do people remember 2 days after they cram for it? Right? We remember everything else says, what, 15% of what we get? So you guys are gonna leave me. You'll remember my gray shoes. And that's it. That's it, exactly, that's it, right? That's it. So, but we keep putting folks through high stakes exams and we make them do it solitarily, right? So when we get along a little bit, my nudge, teachers, is can we rethink pedagogy? Can we rethink what academic excellence is? And I can say this having been a Jesuit in my earlier point of life. I'm not anti-education, right? I'm not anti-academic. But I am looking at a group of folks that are terrified about how they're doing. They're being exposed to high stakes exams repeatedly. I took my little boy on Saturdays doing the SSAT or PSAT, one of those SAT exams. And I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing? This exam thing for? I don't even believe in this. I don't even believe in this. But he's gonna go and sit through it because that's what's gonna happen for him to get into college, right? So we've got to rethink what pedagogy is really. We've got to rethink whether individuals perform or whether individuals master. And isn't mastery iterative? Couldn't mastery and learning be collective, relational in some way? I'm going to ask you to think about making those shifts for yourself as educators, because what's broken for this group of 45% are relationships, right? We've been sitting behind masks. My poor guy went to a brand new school, sat 6 feet away from somebody for breakfast and lunch every day. Never met anybody. He's still having 17 years old. His cohort of boys, they're still having sleepovers at 17 with boys, right? Like wherever we come, they don't go to dances. They don't have social life. They haven't had it for 2 years in a space where they could look at somebody and say, oh, that's a nice space. I think I'll be that face's friend. Okay. So what are we doing with our pedagogy if we can't help them build relationships and work collectively and work, right? So again, older folks in the room, like myself, will remember when that was a thing, right? That was a thing. We would deconstruct the way that we teach, and we'll build teams of people, and we'll let them do the iterative mastery, because the hell, they're not gonna remember anyway, right? But let them take 3 passes at a paper. Let them do, let's have teams of people do stuff as long as they master the learning in that space. Can we do that? Well, that went away again, and then we became open classroom, and that went away again. And we keep going back to the gray-haired sage on the stage, right, that lectures to people in that space, right? So we've got to really rethink about what we're doing. Thanks. So quickly, what's happened in COVID are 3 big things. We've been exposed to chronic stress daily, right? So we started washing the groceries, right? Like, washes I think I wash the grapes before I eat them, right? We're washing the Cheerios boxes as they come in from the supermarket in my house, right? We're taking the little rags of the disinfectant stuff and we're putting them on the watermelon before we eat the watermelon, right? So every day, like, who's safe? Did you get your test? Are you vaccinated? Am I going here? What's gonna happen to this group? Is everybody gonna be all right? Or stand 6 feet apart, boys, right? So we're gonna pick the space. 2 years of exposure to chronic stress brings anxiety, depression, PTSD, substance use disorder. It just does, right? Second, social isolation. 6 weeks of being separated from people, sometimes as few as 3 weeks of being separated from people, breeds anxiety, depression, substance use disorder, post-traumatic stress, right? So lock yourself up someplace, right? I did when I was a Jesuit, I did a long retreat, silent long retreat for 30 days. Those that know me said, how did he keep quiet for 30 days? But I did keep quiet for 30 days, separated from everybody else when I did it. Nearly drove me crazy. I was 23 years old, nearly drove me crazy, right? But people in confinement, solitary confinement, go psychotic. And 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, depending on their background with this. But any normal person put in a space like that gets anxiety, depression, PTSD, substance disorders. We've had 2 years of this. 2 years of this. You can't even make reservations for dinner, right? To be with people, right? Last piece, Seligman's model with dogs, right? So he's trying to undo that now and be the prince of optimism. He was the dog beater for years, like Martin Seligman. So he shocked dogs, right? What happens when you shock dogs? And you can't give them a way out of that experience. Well, they beat up against the wall and try to escape it, and try to escape it, and try to escape it, and they find out that they can't. And then they whimper, right? Then you take the wall down, and you say, look, see, doggy, you can get out of here, and in a minute we'll ring the bell, we're gonna give you a shock, and you'll just go over to the place that's safe. Do they do that? No, they don't, right? No, they don't. They don't do it until you drag them across 25 times by the leash so that they learn to be agentic again, right? We didn't have prom. We didn't bury our older folks. You couldn't, 2 years, we haven't had commencement in 2 years, right? And we didn't take trips. Anything that you were hoping that you could do got frustrated, right? And the whole world was one of Seligman's dog experiments. We all learned how to be helpless. We all lost our agency, right? So the next slide. So we've got emotional dysregulation that comes from chronic exposure to stress, right? Your feelings aren't your feelings, they're not under your control. How many people can relate to that? Yes, we can, all of us, right? We've got loneliness, which is the affective equivalent to social isolation, loneliness. Terrible loneliness, terrible loneliness. And we've got diminished agency, right? We don't feel like we can make stuff happen in our world. Next, please. What's the good news? College, right? College. If we do it better, college is the antidote to this, what ails us, because where's a better place to make a friend, right? Best friends any of us had came in college. Best friends we've ever had. Most access to people like us were here in a space. Most time we had to have friendships with people here in a space like that, right? So college, great opportunity for social connectivity, right? College, a great opportunity for emotional engagement, right? So there's a place where you say, how do you feel about this? And you don't think that that's a weird question. And then you're probably gonna tell me how you feel about that. And I'm probably gonna listen and think, oh, well, that's interesting. It's not how I feel about it, but that's an interesting take on this, whatever. And they have a discussion about that that's feelingful in this space. And whether it's art, whether it's a paper, whether it's a presentation, pick the topic. This is a place on any given day you can demonstrate mastery, right? Not necessarily like your graduate did, but I made a pot today. I painted a picture today. Our team made a presentation today, right? Every week you have an opportunity to that. College is the antidote to what we've been seeing if we do it better, if we do it better. Next, please. So, thinking about reimagining mental health on campus, let me give you some ideas about how to do that. Give me the next one. If you ask faculty if they care about the emotional life of their students, 75% of them will say yes. They want to help. They don't know how to help. They're scared that they're going to have to become someone's therapist. They don't want to take responsibility when someone says, you know what, sometimes I feel like I may have hurt myself. What does hurt yourself mean? Like really? In what way? Do you have a plan for that? I'm not going to ask those next two questions. I'm not. I'm going to send them to this doctor and say, go to the counseling center and let's go see that doctor. She's good. So, but yet you all want to do, you particularly, but most faculty members want to be part of this. They feel like they are, they just don't know what they could do. I think when you think about public health models of intervention, if you folks could be thoughtfully trained a bit, but helped by each other to rethink what pedagogy means, to rethink what relationships with your students would mean, to rethink how we can create a learning environment that is inclusive, that is healthy, that is supportive of our young people. That's primary prevention. The biggest bang for the buck is faculty education around this, right? Biggest bang for the buck that we've got. Second, can you have the next slide? What's a way to do that? Social emotional learning. I'm going to do this really fast, right? So K to 12, they've been doing that for years, 25 years. The Castle Group, probably the best at it, but they've been creating learning environments that value emotional expression, help people to manage relationships, engage people in talks with people in authority to get done what needs to get done, be responsible for your behavior, right? They've found ways, clever ways, to do things that are small but impactful. Can I have the next slide? So the Supreme Court, I'm going to recommend that little book. See that square in the bottom, this SEL playbook? Write that down. It's got 117 clever things to do in your classroom, like this. Every morning, they said in that book, the Supreme Court justices shake hands with each other, right? I thought it was to check for knives, but I don't think that's what they would say. So they shake hands with each other. Why do they shake hands with each other? Because that tradition wants to honor the fact that even though we may be different in the next 25 minutes about the arguments that we have, we're colleagues, we're here together, we're part of this august group of folks that have the honor of looking at the law in this country, right? So every day we shake hands. Every day they do this. They shake hands. It's a ritual, right? I went to college at BC and pick the size of the class, big or small. I didn't know anybody. I never knew people in my class. Nobody ever said, could you guys sit and talk and connect with each other? Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What do you do? What do you know, I'm a first generation college kid. I didn't even know that was a thing, right? So finding ways that we could be like those Supreme Court justices in our class and say to folks, let's take a minute to say, who are you? What are you about? And then a big thing happens, right, in the world. Dramatic things happen in the world. Anybody from the Ukraine in here? Anybody's got roots in the Ukraine in here? Anybody's got family members? Good. How are things going in your family? 5 minutes, that's it. In biology class, right? You can do that, right? Just to anchor people in a space that says there's an outside world that's affecting your inside world. And what do we know? If your inside world is affected, how well are you going to do biology today if you're worried about your family in the Ukraine? Doesn't mean it all goes away, but it does lighten your burden if you know that other people share your concern as well, right? End of the day, they say, where are we going next? What did we learn today? Where are we going tomorrow? Once again, it's 5 minutes of class time. And there's, as I said, there's 117 things in there that they teach you that's much more clever than I'm being. But it's a way of building a community, a learning community. It's a way of saying, you know what, we've got this example. Why don't the 4 of you guys be a team for this? Why don't the 4 of you guys be a team for this? Why don't you bring back some kind of thoughtful analysis of this story? You take this perspective, you take that perspective, you take, right? And we build community by engaging people in that space instead of saying, tomorrow, read the assignment and then be prepared to talk about all 5 perspectives on your own in some way. So finding ways now, and we're gonna have to do this, right? So this doesn't sound like the 60s are back in your classroom again. We're gonna have to do this because 45% of our kids are disconnected, right? This is not me saying to you, wanna be a little sharper in your teaching, think about some of these tools. This is me, a clinician, saying these kids are sick. Our kids are sick, right? We're sick in this space. And it's not gonna get better when we take the masks off. It's not gonna get better when we come back in September. It's not gonna get better. How do we find a way to use the academy to help the mental health of all of our students? Small techniques like this work, right? Small techniques like this work. The SEL folks find it's not just that kids feel better, do better, act better. They also perform better, right? So their achievement tests go up 11%, 15% in studies that they've done where people have adopted SEL, right? Same thing is true in your campus and in most campuses now. We're welcoming people into higher education that hadn't come to higher education before, right? So as we do this, right, we have to be thoughtful about, are we prepared for the folks in front of us? Are we prepared to engage the people that are here? So I did a program for college presidents, the ACOM group, last week. John Della Volpe's got a nice book. If you haven't read it, it's an easy enough read. I told his wife I'd promote the book whenever I could do it for a while. They've got 3 kids, they gotta get through college. But, so you see John in the morning on Morning Joe, right, doing, he's a pollster for the Kennedy School of Government. He said these Generation Z kids, they're not snowflakes, they're sensitive. They're not folks that are takers, they're givers, they're compassionate people. We've got to find a way to engage those folks. We've got folks from cultures we've not seen in our space before. Who are you? And what do you need of me? What do you need of me to be the best you? Because I'm a teacher, right? That's my job, is to help you be the best you in that space. What do I need to learn? We too often do a great job, I told this group of college presidents last week, turning people into eagles and terriers and boxers and banana slugs, right? There's a University of California. So we socialize people to become like us, or what we think. We do a terrible job saying, where are you from? What are you about? How do we engage you? How can I change to be of the best service to you? It's a relationship, the teaching that we have to do. I'm saying this to people that know this. I'm saying it, however, 45% of our kids need us to be different, right, tomorrow, right, need us to be different. Come to the next, please. So I tell this to the senior administrators, right? I'll come talk to you guys whenever you want. I'll come talk to you guys. If you're gonna change in the way that we're needing you to change, someone's gonna pay you, right? Someone has to pay you. We can't ask people that are really busy and really stressed and burdened by the many things that they're burdened by to do more without thinking about how can we make it be worth their while, A, and B, how do we take care of you and your needs? Who's got kids that have a mental health need? Who needs to talk with us about some project or East High, something we could put together, some change that we can make your life easier, right? So these aren't your servants, they're your clients, right? They're your facilitators. They're the people that are gonna do things in this way. And we have to think, and I think this is where we have to be, because there's so many of us, right? There's a ton more teachers than there are another person to add to the counseling service. You can't afford to keep putting people in the counseling service. You can't do it. But if we're gonna do this, we have to be thoughtful. What would make it worth your while to be the best and the most in this? How do I make this feel right by you, right? So money is always a thing, not to forget. Training is a thing, not to forget. Service is a thing, not to forget. How do we make this work for you? Next, please. I think this is close to the end. This is close to the end. Might be good for us. And I stood through the whole thing. Not bad. Right? Don't tell my wife. So did you stand for that whole thing? If we're looking, and we are, to do the right thing by the students that we love and are in community with, in relationship with, we want to do the right thing by those folks. We're really going to have to balance what we think of or reimagine, not just mental health on campus. We're going to have to reimagine one more time what academic excellence is, right? It's not the 333 batter, right? It's not the person that got 4 A's. It's not the person that's the captain of the debate team and the football quarterback and the person that, it's not any of that, right? It really has to be the participant. It really has to be the active participant. It has to be the team, it has to be the group. And we have to be thoughtful about the limitations of what this means. That means that, you know, what do people like Phil and I boast about? I boast about our completion rate, so does he, right? I don't boast about the Carnegie scholars that come out of, or the Rockefeller scholars that come out of our space, right? My son's school, that's what they did. Now, fortunately, I met this group of teachers that love these kids and are really, the headmaster is an idiot. Right? I won't tell you where it is. But I've told Stacy, she knows where it is. Headmaster's an idiot. Headmaster's an idiot. So, you know, it's about all the kids we get to Harvard, and it had nothing to do with, I mean, first of all, you didn't make those kids, right? Your moms and dads made those the kids that are going to go to Harvard. Don't fool yourself with that. Your curriculum didn't do that, right? But how do we help more kids move in this space, right? So here, I'll take some comments. I'm sure you don't have many more questions. Here's some things to reimagine, not just about mental health and moving from a clinical to a public health model, but about pedagogy, right? How do we do our business in a different way that helps these kids that have had a terrible experience with social isolation, chronic exposure to stress, and terrible barriers to their sense of agency and mastery to do well coming out of this. And I'm going to tell you that as a mental health professional, this is 3 more years like this. This is not September, right? You know this, and it's 3 more years of this. So how do we find a way to create a public health response to that? So thank you for laughing at my jokes. Thank you for your attention. What about comments or questions if you guys have?
It's not a shy crowd, so I'm surprised if you have no questions.
Yes, go ahead.
How about the elephant in the room, social media? Your comments on that?
The elephant in the room about social media. Yeah, it's really hard. I don't know how to turn it off at my house. So what about we let people think? So what's your question behind that? Social media is difficult because?
Well, they're lonely and they're anxious, but they're seeing all kinds of other people out there, or people in the media or celebrities having such a great time, and they're not.
Yeah, so in some ways, social media has been really helpful because it's given people a semblance of connectivity at a time when they otherwise would be sitting in their room, right? Many times it's been cruel and abusive, and that's unconscionable, especially for our young people, the folks that capitalize on people's eating disorders and find ways to torture those young people. There's a special kind of hell for those people, I think, in that space. I don't know that I've got a good idea about what one does in that space, except to try to create some healthy alternatives. Anybody else have an idea about what you might do? I try to limit my kids' exposure to it. It doesn't work. And look at how big I am. He's bigger than I am now, actually. So it doesn't work. Yes.
I guess what I'm concerned about is access to mental health in general. The wait list, sometimes 4 months or more,
Yeah.
because we just don't have enough mental health clinicians
Yeah.
to support everybody, as well as inequity amongst certain groups of individuals. You know, a lot of times it's for people that have health insurance, more money, that kind of thing. And so there's a severe access issue, as well as quality of mental health services. So, though it's important that we support our students, I get concerned about how we can really help them.
So we have to build the workforce, right? So you'll meet my folks. There's Mark Fabelard's in the back. Raise your hand, Mark Fabelard. Thank you very much. Mark's got a program at William James that takes college graduates. Though Phil said to me, why don't you take community college graduates? They want a gap year to do this. So now he and Mark are trying to find a way to build that in. So Mark goes and gets the kid that doesn't know what she wants to do next year and is this far away from being in his mom's basement for the year, right? And says, why don't you do a Peace Corps year with us? We'll get you into a mental health setting. We'll train you. We'll supervise you. We'll mentor you. We'll give you a couple of college graduate credits. It's an extraordinary program, the Behavioral Health Service Corps. It's an innovative program. And something like 68%, 70% of the folks that go through that stay in the second year in that space. So we just got some money, not enough, but we got a little bit of money to be able to expand that. So we've got 20, we're gonna look for 30, I'd like to get 100. No big surprise to my staff. I'd like to have 100 next year, right? So we're gonna build that out. That's one avenue of creativity, but we're coming to you folks to say, you've got sensitive, thoughtful, compassionate community folks that are interested in careers in mental health. You don't have to have a PhD to get in that space. There's a way you could work with an associate's degree if that's what you wanted to do. Plenty of need for that. We've got, Jemima's not here, we've got Hilda's here. So in Dr. Clark's program, Dr. LaVoy's program, we've got folks that are workers, and we take the workforce and we say, you want to work with Dr. Augusto, you don't have a bachelor's degree, we'll get you a bachelor's degree. You need to come to Middlesex to get the Gen Ed courses that we don't teach. We'll partner with you all and send you our folks, but we'll do the last 60 credits for you to get a bachelor's degree. We had 8 in the first year that we did this, I'm proud to say. 7 of those 8 were honors graduates. One of those 8 was a summa cum laude graduate. None of them were going to graduate. None of them, without this program, were going to graduate. Imagine leaving how many in this room were summa cum laude graduates, right? How many of us were summa cum laude? He was going to leave it on the floor, right? Because somebody didn't get in there and work with them and do that kind of work. So there's a host of things we need to do, but we can't fix it tomorrow, right? So I've spent my career saying to people we're short in this space. The APA has spent its career saying you're educating too many people in those professional schools. Somewhere in the middle of that, more on my side than on theirs, is the truth, which is we need to find a myriad of ways to bring a workforce coming forward. If you're a mom or a dad, you want to get mental health care for your kids, 65% of the time you cannot find it if you're on an active search. If you're a person of color, 87% of the time you're going to find a white female, right? You're not going to find somebody that understands your background, right? We're a long way away from making those corrections. Our presence here today is a step towards that, right? You guys see those folks, you guys teach those folks, you guys can nurture those folks. And we are a place that, when I first started this, I thought, well, people are going to go to the community college, they're going to save some money, they're going to get an efficient education for themselves, right? And then they're going to want to go party their butt off at UMass, right? But it turns out that's not the case, right? You guys have Phil introduced this remarkable woman. Was she from Jamaica? Yeah. Remarkable young woman, poised, present, wicked smart, as we say in Everett. But she wants to be in a place that's intimate, like you guys. She wants to be with our folks because we know that it's like the Cheers bar, right? Because we know her name and we know what she's about, right? And we can bring the love and the community and the inclusion into that space. So we have to do all of these things together. It's not a short fix. This is really a broken system. And I don't know why Charlie Baker keeps tone deaf to this. You gotta pay people more money to do this work than they're getting paid. Like, what the hell is wrong? And he's an insurance guy. He's an insurance guy. Like, for Christ's sake, Charlie. You know, what are you missing? Duh, it's money. Right, it's the money. Yes, please.
I was just gonna say, this is so timely. I mean, the Gaston Institute at UMass Boston just put out a webinar on Voices from the Field, COVID-19 Social Emotional Wellness among the Latinx community. I mean, so I really appreciate this opportunity that we're having here. And at the college, we've done a lot with equity-mindedness and trying to change our pedagogy and trying to change our practice, but it also takes a toll on the faculty. So I was particularly intrigued by the slides you had up around taking care of faculty, and I wondered if you had thoughts about that, because it is taking a toll for those folks that are looking at the curriculums, doing this work, trying to equitize it or create more anti-racist.
So this year, I'm the chair of this group of college presidents that are not already me, right? So everybody else is in ACOM, the Association of Independent Presidents. In May, I said to them, call your faculty yourself. Call your faculty, see how they are doing. Make a rounds with your folks. In my place, I did it. Department chairs did it. We didn't have any agenda. One faculty member in our place said, this is the first time anybody's ever called me and they hadn't asked me for anything. I mean, you just want to talk to me about how I'm doing, how my family is doing? Yes, we are. We're really interested in doing that. Very few people understood the importance of that. I said to them, go to your counseling center and don't just talk to the director or the dean or the vice president. Go talk to the folks in the group. So if you're in a place of authority, go sit with the folks and let them tell you what they're experiencing. Don't miss that. It's really important that we do that. If you are the person with the purse strings, you pay the people that are in this thing. You have to. right? It's another job, it's another piece of a job. If you are in a space where you're asking people to do something that's, I teach biology, I don't mean to brag on the biology program, because I was never very good at it. So how do I talk to people about feelings? How do I talk to people in a way that's sensitive, empathic? Tell me how to do that. I'm smart, I'll figure it out, right? So there's training that gets involved with something like that. There's a reassurance that you don't have to be responsible for people's depression and suicidality. If you haven't been a clinician, you know the 5 things that make your skin crawl that someone says when they're gonna go kill themselves. You just know it. And all of us that have done this for years have tremendous tolerance for stuff that would make a lot of people's skin crawl, right? Just because, But I know that it's not to be worried about in this way, right? But I know what it is. I got to tell you that. I got to help you understand what that is, because you're coming naively to that space. It'd be like asking me to teach biology, right? And I couldn't pick it up and go ahead and do it, right? I need the training. So there are things to be thoughtful about with faculty in this space, and as much as we can see, I think, that our customer or our stakeholder is not just the student, which sounds also like the thing you don't want to say if you're a guy like me, but we make it all about the student too much of the time, and we neglect the fact that this has also got to be about staff, right, and faculty. So we got students, we've got faculty, we've got staff in this space. But what about the registrar, right? What about the person at the front desk, right? We've got to find a way to spend the time with people that we have to do that. Yes?
I appreciate this conversation significantly because we are in the midst of really trying to look at what our counseling services, we don't even call it counseling services anymore. Pre-COVID, 3 years ago, we really looked towards, and Berlin over here, she's kind of our sole man standing. We really went to a consultation model. For that reason, we really wanted to look at how did we get the expertise out to the faculty members. But one of the things that did affect for us was we did some connecting with local resources and trying to refer out, and that's where we're struggling now is, the referring out is just not there and our students aren't there. But I think what we did do well was really build this consultation model where our faculty have somebody to go to that has expertise.
Yeah.
And so when they are trying to analyze, and we tend to have that really high, whereas a faculty member, way down here, they don't even want to ask that next question as you're saying.
Right.
And so I think we did that well, but we're still at that next level of how are we getting the students to we're doing it good, but then we just don't have that, how do we get the students in to get counseling? Because it's just not out there.
So I'll take it from the top back for a second and say, before they take my membership card Ipsy away, most people don't want therapy. They don't. That's not what they're looking for. They think that they want therapy, but they don't stay for therapy. Most people that go to community mental health centers for years, the mode, the median, and the mean visit, 3 visits, 4 visits. So most people don't. I had 2 10-year psychoanalyses, right? That's on the couch, 4 days a week, for 20 years, right? And my staff was saying, how the hell did that happen? Like, what? And you got left with this? You got left with this? Most people don't want that kind of intensive treatment. They want to get a fix for what they feel, right? So first of all, be thoughtful about, we've got to get the outside group that's going to do that. That's not your solution, I don't think. It's part of your solution, right? And telemental health is part of your solution, I think, right, as you do it. We've not done this kind of talk as a group before. We've not done this kind of talk. We haven't put in the 6-session asynchronous online program about managing stress, or haven't run seminars about drinking or relationship. We haven't done any of that public health stuff. I'm of the opinion, my hope coming away from this is, if we do this for the next 3-4 years, we'll take the strain, some of the strain off of this. If you guys aren't being worried at a prestigious college, pick the place about your final exam period and how you gotta knock it out of the park to get into the next whatever. I do think this approach works, but it needs 3 years, right? It needs 3 years, and we need to believe in it. And so we need to be thoughtful about, well, this year we're gonna do this. I'd like to see us invest more in finding ways to bring DEI and behavioral health and SEL into the classroom life of teachers, because I think that's primary prevention of mental health, right? I argued that with the state, they gave us money, and Dr. Taylor got some money from us because these are people on the front line, and we just have to reimagine, right, what it is. No, that many people don't need a 50-minute hour with someone like me. They just don't, right? Some do.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Blue Boy, yes.
Hi. As I was listening to you, I had thought about something, something that we did. Each one of our departments, I don't know, should I stand or something?
Only if you've had a knee replacement.
My knee hurts.
There we go, all right, that qualifies. A hurt knee qualifies.
No, I was thinking about what we did. Each department did different things to be connected during the pandemic. And one thing that the counseling and behavioral health faculty did was we used to meet every other week for regular faculty meetings, and then people said, why don't we meet on the weeks off just to talk and to chat? And that was really fantastic. I mean, enjoyed it as much or more than they did. And we just connected and talked about how things were difficult, or I don't know, shows that we watch on TV, or what did we do with the students, but in a different way, more relaxed. And I think that was very helpful. But one thing that I realized when you were talking is that we're all a bunch of psychologists and counselors. So we're all mental health people, right? But many of us have private practice. They were seeing people, also were stressed out, and so taking care of the people who take care of others is very important, because otherwise we burn out. But on the other hand, I was also thinking about the therapy comment that Nick said. And it's true, most people don't want therapy. Most people want connection, right? So if you figure out a way of keeping people connected, even if you don't know all the different techniques of mental health or whatever, they have something that draws them to you, and to keep them connected. And people who are connected are less likely to take extreme measures. They're more likely to reach out. So I think that any plan that you have should include that connection piece, both for faculty, for staff, for students. And I think that the consultation model you have is pretty cool. That might be sense.
So, once again, relationships. That was more like a nickel. That was good. Did you say that? A dime, maybe?
Yeah.
So relationships, right? A feeling of belonging, a feeling of included, a feeling of respect, a feeling of, right? Having an opportunity to master something, right? Having a chance to share your feelings, right? That's really the antidote to what we're experiencing at 45%. It's the antidote. But it's not a 3-week shortcut, right? It's, can we budget for this? Can we do this? Can we make time for that? Can I be honest enough to acknowledge that I don't know this in some way? And can we make an investment? So what do you got for time?
Well, we're going to first of all thank Nick for his. So much of what you've seen and heard today has been so critical for the institution. We've already learned about really digging deep around that sense of belonging, the idea of continuing professional development with faculty and staff, and finding space and time and money for that to happen. But more importantly, the idea of the kinds of, we were talking about, Jessica, is that people make an assumption, no offense to the people who have their doctorates in psychology, but we're making an assumption that some of our frontline learners have to have a certain credential in order to do this. And I think that we're learning in a number of fields. We've learned it in biotechnology. We've learned it in that there's an expectation that there is this pipeline, and the pipeline's not being created. But what we can do is we can begin to create that pipeline. And human services workers and people who have psychology degrees here, as they're thinking about what their next step is, the kind of opportunity with the core we've talked about is taking a community college graduate and putting them in a place where they can begin to develop some of those skills and actually earn a living while they're doing this and continuing their education. It's a theme that you're going to keep hearing that's going to be so important for our students. So thank you for all of your talk, but also the fact that I think you've referenced that that's what's so special about a community college environment. That's what Middlesex is all about. But more importantly, that's what we've learned that William James is also so much about, and that's why the alignment of this particular program is really important for us. So as I've said, I think to you and the faculty, the door is always open. Our campus is your campus. I'm excited about how we begin to figure this out together, perhaps even bringing clinicians on site here to work as interns, as part of the community, to be able to do some of that referrals, the possibility to develop the core, the professional development. We've had a conversation, Pam knows that we're losing one of our assistant deans, Pat Bruno is retiring. We're talking a lot about how we reconfigure that position. So it's an assistant dean that has mental health embedded in the position so that we can do some of this kind of work and essentially provide the kind of professional development that all of us need to create that sense of belonging. Jennifer's experience with Paul Hernandez, and I'll get you a copy of Paul's book, The Pedagogy of Real Talk. We now have a student affairs group that's beginning to have that conversation, and it's about being vulnerable and figuring out how we connect with the students that come to our institutions and make that connection meaningful enough so that they will stay connected to the institution. And that's all part of all of our mental health. So we need to continue to take care of each other. I want to thank Nick and his people for being here again today. I do want to give Matthew and Joanne an opportunity to talk a little bit about the program, the academic program that we've constructed, if you would, just for a moment. And then we'll follow up with a signing, and then we'll have some refreshments, and we'll all hang together. How's that?
So, tough act to follow. But one thing I'd like to say is that we sign a lot of articulation agreements to connect our programs to four-year programs. But this one is really different, and it's different for a number of reasons, and it's particularly exciting to me. Because generally, when people are in our human services program, we're talking about what are their career options, and it's unfortunate for me to say that when you finish an associate's degree in human services at Middlesex, likely you have exactly the same career options you had before you undertook the associate's degree. Many of the folks in those programs are working as direct care workers, and we sort of promise them that eventually you'll get to a master's degree at some point and you'll make a living wage, but there's this sort of cliff that you fall off of. And in psychology, there are other folks who say, you know, they want to do counseling, and the reality is it's really far away before you can start to get practical into the field. So what William James has offered through this is a couple of things. One is the really smooth transfer of credit from those programs, that the first 60 credits are totally taken care of, and we know that they're going to go in as juniors, and they're going to go right to those pragmatic courses that are going to help them to find employment at all different levels. And in fact, in addition to that, there's opportunities for paid work, there's opportunities for mentorship, and having taken a group of students there 2 weeks ago, and you know, I think a number of people were just really surprised, I have to say, how similar the supportive environment felt. It's not what we normally see when we go to a transfer institution. So, somebody's called it, probably for me. So one part is about what the environment is like when they get there, what the various opportunities are as they progress, that it's not just a wait and see until you get a bachelor's degree and apply to a master's program, that people can get right to work. But then the way that credit comes, William James does not have interest in the lower division classes and teaching introduction to psychology and freshman composition. They leave that to us. And so really students in any liberal arts major can go in. If they decide, as many of our students do, intersect with different helping professions, they say, gee, I want to give back. I've never thought about it, but I might want to do this. They could be in the creative writing program, which is essentially a liberal arts and sciences transfer degree, and they'll have all those general education courses. They'll be ready to go in if that's what their interest is. So you know, it's a number of things, but really the supportive environment, the variety for opportunities for work and internships, and the easy transfer of the credit make it really exciting. I really feel like this is the first stop on our partnership. We're having conversations about taking some of the courses that are part of the William James catalog that we don't have, that our students might have interested in, and try to create some space in those classes for the fall. So we know that many of the folks who are in our human services program who work in the field will wind up in management positions, whether they want to or not over time. And so we are hoping to get a couple of seats in their leadership and management and human services class, which is part of the pre-completion program. And there's a introduction to psychology of nutrition, I believe is the title, which can be taken as a science class, which would be probably more interesting as a science requirement than some of the classes. No offense to Kate if she's still here. So that's I think between sharing some of that curriculum, getting students to know what those classes are like, getting some more word of mouth on our campus, I think we're going to have many more opportunities. I'd love to see some of our students go into your programs and come back and teach for us. I think we have a strong commitment to diversity. We have a fantastically diverse set of majors in human services, career transfer, psychology, and other majors. And I just see this as really the beginning of something really important for us.
Should we make an official signing of this agreement?
Yes. So I'll say this as we do this before we split. Thank you for what you do. You don't teach my kid, but you teach some dad's kid, you teach some mom's kid, and you do it in a way that's passionate and loving and brings forward their best self. And thank you for what you do. Where do I sign?
Right above your name, sir.
I can feel it at the top.
It's just the way it
Just the
worked
way it
out.
worked out.
M before W.
Ah, right here.
Oh, so we can do it.
Yeah.